You want to talk about a hidden treasure? This is it. A legit hot rod from the 60s, and we just put it back on the road for the first time in over 30 years. Let's check it out. The car is a 1934 Plymouth Coupe, and it was built in the 1960s by my father-in-law, Charles Berry. Charles started this project when he was 16 years old. He saved up enough money from a paper route to buy the body, which I believe was $100 or less, and it wasn't in great shape, and it was just the hull itself. It didn't have fenders or anything like that. And then he bought a 1940 Ford frame for $25 and went to work trying to make it all fit. And he had to spread the cowl on this car. He had to cut the back of the frame off. So he did away with the original rear suspension and made his own. Used coil springs, built his own perches, made his own ladder bars, and it worked out pretty good. So Charles originally set this thing up to have a small block Chevy in it, but then he found a 57 Chrysler with a 392 Hemi, so he couldn't pass that up. He put it in the car, and even though it had pretty good horsepower, the car handled terribly. All that weight on the nose of a car that's already pretty light in the back. He said it just drove terrible, and I can imagine, because it really doesn't drive that great now, but I can imagine with a couple hundred extra pounds on the nose that it was kind of a handful. So Charles spent a couple years on this car, gathering up parts and doing what he could to get it on the road. And a couple years after he bought it, he finally got it driving. And it actually wasn't long after that he enlisted in the Navy and eventually served in the Vietnam War. Charles said that his neighbors had to have been thrilled when he enlisted in the Navy, because that meant that this old hot rod wasn't rumbling around up and down the street all the time. And I can totally relate. I'm sure that my neighbors don't love this thing with open headers and a big lumpy cam and all that kind of stuff. It's just not it's not neighbor friendly, but it is a lot of fun. When Charles came back from the war, the car was still there. He'd kept it at his dad's house, and it was right there waiting for him, and of course he had plenty of time to think about it, had ideas and new stuff he wanted to do. So then after that, it kind of the car transformed into more of a street car, where he had originally planned on drag racing it. About the latest picture I've got of it is from 1977. He had redone some stuff and got it really, tuned up for the street. But after that, there's kind of a gap. The car just sat pretty much after that. And part of that's just because life happens. You get married, you have kids, you have a job that is stressful, and just all that stuff adds up, and it doesn't leave very much time for hot rods. So, the fortunate thing is that Charles didn't want to let go of this car. He didn't want to let go of this car or his '63 Impala Super Sport convertible. The last time Charles drove this car was in 1985. He drove it from his old house to his brand new house that he had built, and he built it with a basement specifically to put this car and a couple of others in there for safekeeping. And unfortunately, this one kind of sat in the corner, and it was hard to get in and out of there, so it just stayed. It sat, at least it was in the dry, but it sat for a little over 30 years. And that was kind of when I brought the idea up to drag it out of the basement, bring it up here to my shop, and we'd put this thing back on the road. So after I talked Charles into letting me kind of borrow this car and bring it up here and do some work on it, I got my buddy Kyle to go down. He's got a rollback. He went down to Georgia and picked this thing up, and I rode back with him. And, his rollback ended up on the side of the road on the way back. He burnt the clutch up on the way back. That's a whole other story, but Kyle's always there to help me to drag home some of these projects, and he's there to help me to work on them too, so I'm always thankful for him. I brought it in. The first thing I wanted to do was to see what it would take to crank this thing up. We had just gotten it running. We hadn't gotten all the brakes and all that stuff done yet. We hadn't got it actually on the road yet, but we had gotten it running. We invited him up for the weekend. There was a Southeast Gassers race at Brainerd Motorsports Park. We went down there, we hauled this thing down there in another one of our old drag car survivors and put it out there just for display. And my wife was kind of wanting us to all get together for a picture. So we're kind of all getting in the position, and Charles is standing in front of the car. I reach back here and flip the switch and turn it on, and the car fires right up. It was an emotional moment because Charles didn't realize that I'd been working on the car. Didn't realize that the thing was even close to being able to crank up. So that was a lot of fun. I think everybody had tears in their eyes on that one. It was fun and emotional and really kind of helped inspire me to keep going, because if he got that big of a kick out of just hearing it run, I knew he would love taking it down the road again. It ran pretty rough, but after we made some changes, we put some fresh spark plugs in it, new plug wires, put a Pertronix electronic ignition in it, and rebuilt the carburetors. After all that, this thing runs smooth and really hasn't given me any problems. We also went through the brakes. Since this thing is sitting on a 44 frame, we just use 44 wheel cylinders and brake lines and hoses and all that stuff, and put a new master cylinder on it. I used a 60 to 62 Chevy or GMC combo master cylinder, so it's a single chamber on the brake side and a single chamber on the clutch side, but it's together. It's kind of old school hot rod deal, and that's what he had on it years ago, so that's what I put back on it. It's not totally ideal because it's got a big bore. It's like 1 1/8" bore, and it makes it really stiff, but it's got the right look, and I can put up with the stiff pedal. The biggest item on my to-do list was tires and wheels. I worked for Coker Tire Company, so I had to put something on here that really did the car justice, and I chose a set of Firestone tires. It's got bias plies on it. The fronts are 560 15s. The rears are Firestone Dragster Cheater Slicks, and the front wheels are Rocket Strike with a cast center. They're 15 by 4.5. The rears are 15 by 8s, and they've got the large Ford 5 on 5.5 inch bolt pattern. My dad worked on this thing a lot. Him and his partner there, Wally Smith, they put a steel firewall in it, a steel floor pan. They worked out the brake lines and all that kind of stuff. They did a lot to kind of help me, since I didn't have a whole lot of time to work on it, as I was actually getting pretty close to my magazine deadline, which is always handy to kind of help usher a project along. But they helped a lot, and my dad was also here for the first time I drove it down the road, which was really neat because that's always a fun experience, and it was just neat to have my dad there with me to ride along on the first trip down the road. And we laughed because of how it made a bunch of noise and rattled and it was bumpy, and that's just what a hot rod's supposed to be. And we had a lot of fun with it. My best memory with this car, probably the third or fourth time I had driven it. I was actually driving it to go do a photo shoot on it for a magazine article, and took it down the road here, and I live just probably a quarter mile away from an airport, which is a great photo shoot location. And took off down the road here, and I thought that'd be a good time to open up the secondaries on the 4-barrel and see what would happen. And the thing, I mean, it responded well, took gas, and it went on down the road, and that was one of those moments where I could very clearly see what Charles was talking about as far as some of the handling incapabilities this car has. I mean, it was a little bit sketchy and a little bit scary, but that's part of the fun. And you don't know which way it's going to go. When you let off the gas, it kind of wants to go one way, and when you give it gas, it wants to go another. And it's just one of those things that it all kind of clicked right then when I got on the gas, and this thing kind of came alive, and I was just hoping I could get it all gathered up before something bad happened. And then it was even more fun when Charles came up here, when I was able to give him a ride down the road in it, and then turn him loose in it, see what he thought about it. And of course, I drove down the road several times before he came. I really took it easy and just make sure this thing is all good and not gonna kill me. And he hopped in this thing, and it was like he had never stopped driving. I went up there as he was starting to crank it up, and I started giving him tips on how to get it cranked, and I was like, he knows all of this car's tricks. He already knows. And it was just kind of a surreal moment to see him take off down the road, knowing that he had pieced this thing together when he was a teenager and then held on to it. He had to work around it basically his whole life. It was kind of in his way. And then to get back in it and drive down the road many years later, that was a neat feeling, and that was kind of the whole purpose of doing it, is to help this thing get back on the road and let him take it down the road again, and get some use out of it, enjoy it, and that kind of brings us to what we're going to do with it in the future, and that will be just to take it to cruise-ins and car shows and nostalgia drag races and kind of share this car's story. And who knows, somebody might remember it from back years ago when Charles used to run around in the Atlanta area. They might remember this car from back then. So any of those memories, I mean, that's worth cherishing, and it's definitely worth documenting, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to shoot this video, kind of show you the inside and outside of this car and give you some history on it. So that's it for this one. It's a 1934 Plymouth Coupe body, 40 Ford frame, Chevrolet motor, Pontiac grill, Lincoln rear end, Plymouth taillights. It's got a little bit of everything. And this is just a true historic hot rod that I'm just blessed to have been a part of. And I had a lot of help along the way. I had help from my dad, Troy, his partner, Wally Smith, my buddy, Kyle Shadden, Denny George. There's a lot of guys that kind of pitched in and contributed to getting this thing on the road. And, just thankful that Charles let me drag it up here and work on it. He trusted me to do the right thing, and, I hope that I did. I hope that putting this thing together sort of in the way that he was intending to do it in the 60s. I hope that worked out. I think it's cool. I'm ready to get it out and drive it some more and maybe get a little bit more used to it, so I'm not quite so scared taking it down the road. But that's it for now. I'm pretty happy with where it's at and excited for where it's going.